Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. Hope everybody is doing well tonight. We have some pretty good news. The parser is up and running, which is awesome. Thankfully, it was just a handful of small issues. We were nearly there last night. Honestly, if I had had about half an hour more, I probably would have knocked it out then. So that's really good news. We'll be able to move on to actually using it tonight, I hope. So before we jump into all that, I do want to take a quick second and just thank the supporters of the channel, starting with the partners, who are the highest tier of subscription over on Patreon and YouTube memberships. They are Gabi Bashir and Gerbolis Inc. I'd also like to thank all the other supporters listed here on the screen. They are a combination of Twitch subscriptions, YouTube memberships, and Patreon subscriptions that are the other tiers of subscription, not partners, right? So thank you all very much for your support. I greatly appreciate that. And I hope it goes without saying that I appreciate each and every one of you viewers, whether you are joining us over on the Twitch side or the YouTube side. We do simulcast to both. So I've got both chats here up on different monitors so that I can see what is going on both sides. So I try to monitor that to the best of my ability. So yes, that being said, this is an interactive stream. So if you guys have any questions, comments, want to feel out, wow, words. If you want to jump in and chat, and feel like chatting, then I will be happy to chat with you, right? Apparently I'm tired today. Singy, hello. How's it going? LQD and Ullerwig, hello. Good to see you guys. Apotham, hello. Welcome to the stream. So, as I alluded to, upon starting the stream, I did figure out the issues with the parser. And like I said, there were actually relatively small issues. So I'm just going to kind of step through those changes here. And so the first thing that we actually had to fix was a bug in K-string, actually. So the string free is what was causing a seg fault last night. And the reason for that was because this K memory size get alignment, or K memory get size alignment rather, actually refers to the state pointer. And since we were running from the context of a unit test, we did not have a state pointer. And so what I've done is I've changed this to instead just look up the size of the string and free the string instead under that appropriate tag. So instead of trying to look up the block of memory, that's just what we did, right? We don't have a way to look this up if we don't have a state set up. It doesn't use the dynamic allocator. It just uses system calls for that stuff, which as far as our unit tests are concerned, unless we're testing that specifically, is just fine. So that was that bug there. I put a comment in there as to why we changed that up, just in case I ever forget down the road. The other thing that I did is I slightly tweaked the file to add just a couple more test scenarios. So our test here had like a mixed array property. It had a number property. It had a object property. Another array that sort of had various levels of nesting in it. And then a little bit further down, we had a numeric property. And then I added a Boolean property and a string property at the base level just so we could test that as well. And so between that and all of our mixed arrays here, we should be good to go, right? So if we jump into the parser, this looks like a lot of changes, and I guess it's a lot of little changes, but half of it is actually renames, right? So one thing that we did was we actually tried to go through and kind of rename things that were crappily named. So for example, where I was just naming things obj, this is to say it's the new object that we're creating. Instead of P here, we name that to unnamed array property, right? Just to kind of be explicit as to what it was. So these two things are just renames. And then actually all of this is renames until this last line here. So one thing that we were forgetting to do is we were forgetting to update the current object. So we were pushing the object to the correct place in the actual object / array. But what we weren't doing is we weren't setting the current object, which is sort of our context that we need in order to know what to add properties to and so forth. So we did that here, and we did that in the array section as well. And so the other change was in the else condition here. In other words, if we're not pushing to an array, we actually were not doing anything with the current object either, right? So the logic here is a little bit different. So right after we push, right, we actually come down here and we also set the current object, right? So instead of doing that outside of this else and treating it the same as in both cases, it's actually not the same. So if we're pushing to an array, we push that to an array, right? Yeah. So if we're adding this to an array, we basically just grab the do property as it is, right? We're creating an object inside of an array, right? We have to treat that differently if we are not in an array, right? So instead of doing that, here we essentially push to the current property value object array, right? And so that's where we push there, and then we set the current object. So this logic was correct, but it was in the wrong place, and it was treating both of these cases the same, and it shouldn't have been. So that was fixed. And also, we weren't setting the current property type in a few places, and so that has been fixed as well, so that all the properties are of the correct type. We also had some places where we weren't expecting identifiers, where we should have been. So whenever we open a curly brace, meaning we're starting an object, the next thing that we should be expecting is an identifier. So expect identifier should have been flipped to true. It was not. The bracket open is almost exactly the same changes all the way through. In fact, there's very little difference, so there's not really much point in stepping through. Let's see. I added some scoping in places that was missing it. That's what those changes are right there. Not a big deal. We were being a little bit overzealous in where we were actually setting our number type onto the current property. That should only happen once we've built that string full of all of the numeric characters and tokens, and then combine that and parse it out to either an int or a float. That's the only time that should happen. So I removed a couple of those. There was one there, another one here, and then another one here. And then we added a missing type assignment for string, the string type. We were also missing it for Boolean. And then down here, we weren't setting it for number, and this is the only place that it should be set, is either here or here, right? And that's it, right? That is literally all the changes that were required to get this working. So we were actually really close. Let's see. Hey, we have trouble in Kohi Paradise. Clang changed the download site, and I can't find a Windows download. It's there. I do remember vaguely having to look for this the other day for a different reason. Yeah, so it should be... available on the GitHub page. I think... I guess they're doing all the releases there on the GitHub page. Was that different at one point? I can't remember. Yeah, so you can download it from here. What you may have to do is scroll down a little bit. Should be one of these assets here. Let me see if I can find it. Isn't it? I always forget what they call it. Do they call it MSVC? I can't remember. That's the source code. I don't want that. It's in here somewhere. It's in this list. There it is right here. LOVM 1701 Win64 exe. So what I can do is I'll drop a link to this in both chats, just in case you guys are wondering where that is. so that you guys have some context. I'm dropping a link to the page, not the executable. All right. Let's see. Diamond, good evening. How are you doing? Good to see you here. Boss Machine, that's an awesome name. Boss Machine Amiga, no less. Hi, how's it going? First time chat. Welcome. It's going well. Can't complain. We actually got our custom parser working tonight, which is sweet. I'm about to show that in a second. You reached the math library section and decided to go full SIMD, all the Lin algebra stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. That's something I still really need to handle at some point, but I don't think that's going to stop us from releasing our first game on this, because it's going to be simple. SIMD will really matter when we have tons and tons of objects, but I think for a relatively small scene, it's not going to matter. Okay, so I'm going to go to debug mode here and run, right? And we've, as a refresher, we're running this from the context of a unit test, which now basically just does everything, right? It loads up this file, and then tokenizes it, and then runs the token list through a parse and builds out a tree. And that tree is what we have over here in debug data land, right? So what we have here is I've adjusted this this debug window just to kind of show some of the properties. We should probably maybe write some sort of utility to traverse the tree and maybe print it out so that we can actually see it. But for right now, I'm not gonna concern myself with that. But if we look at just the properties of all these things, the first thing that we see here is we have a type of array, which is consistent with this mixed array. So if we open that up, we see we have mixed array as the name, and then we can at least see the first value here, which is just 1, right? So let's see. Or is that the, oh wait, no, I have to look at the object and then 1. Sorry, properties, number, right? And then if we look here, it's an unnamed property, right? But the value, wait a minute, did I do this wrong? Did I mess something up in the time that, type array, property number. Parse that as a float. That's interesting. It's a 1.0 float, so that might have gotten borked somehow. Because it should be an integer, so we'll have to look at that. But if we look a little bit further, we have another number, which is here, which is test property, right? So if we look at its value, it is negative 0.2. We have a little bit of a rounding error there, but that's a floating point thing, right? So we have 0.2, negative 0.2 here. Next we have properties, which is an object. So we see that we have a property type object. And then we can look at least at the first property of that, which is name of test scene, right? So we can drill down into that in a second. And then if we look at property 3, that's going to be this nodes array right here, right? So again, we just have sort of a mixed bag here. The first one is going to be 1. So if we take a look at the value, right, properties, and the first one, again, it's a float. So I don't know why it's doing that. There might be a bug in how we're clearing that string, maybe. Okay. And so after nodes, we have a number, which is foo, right? And its value is 32. Yeah, it's always parsing it as float. That's weird. Even if it's an integer. I wonder why that is. And then we have Boolean. So we have bar here, which is, if we look at the B, is true. And then our last property here is a string. And the variable name is bollocks, and the value is rubbish, right? So it does look like it's parsing correctly, minus the minor bug where it's parsing ints as floats. That's a little bit weird, so we'll have to look at that. But other words, for all intents and purposes, it is working. So, am I going to make a case in Hello World tutorial? I mean, I don't know. I don't know that there's much tutorial to build on top of it, right? We've kind of just brutally gone through the steps of actually making a parser. I guess we can go ahead and try and troubleshoot a little bit and see if we can't figure out in this number parsing why it thinks... Actually, we'll just debug this. Let's just debug it. So, excuse me. Let's see. Let's get rid of these working tree things. Okay. Let's debug it. We'll go to where we actually push the string or the numeric, right? Let's see. Okay, so it's down here somewhere. After booleans, here we go, I think. Okay, so at the new line. Oh, I bet I know what's happening. Womp womp. That is a bug. We're doing string index of, right? Which is only going to return false if it finds a dot at the first position, right? Because it returns -1 if not found. So, I didn't even have to debug it to actually see what the issue is there. All we need to do is change this guy to if string index of. Let's see, do we want is not equal to -1, right? So if we don't have -1, then that means we found a decimal point and we treat it as a float. If it is -1, then we treat it as an integer. Right, so thankfully that was an easy one to find. I'm pretty confident that that's going to work too. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. And we'll just take a look at, I guess we can drill down into this first one here. We'll check all of the instances of it just to make sure. So we have the mixed array here. Then we have the objects, which are the actual array. The first property was a number. Its value, integer 1. Perfect. All right, so that one is good. The next one is test prop, right? So that should be a float. Let's just make sure that that looks good too. So that is still a float. That looks good. So that's good to go. Properties we can skip. Nodes, we can actually look at the first property in there. So we're going to say value, let's see. Value object properties. First one's value is 1, which matches up what we have here. So that's correct. I probably should have chosen a different value than 1, but whatever. So the next one that we want to look at is all the way down here to foo. Right, so that's this guy. So it is a property type number. And if we take a look at the value, it is I32, right? So that is also being parsed as an integer. So that bug is also fixed. All right, let's see. Tin Spin, first time chat, welcome to the stream. I hope you're doing all right tonight. Hey, how come you picked Vulkan over OpenGL? So OpenGL is basically deprecated at this point. That is not the same as obsolete, so don't mistake what I'm saying there, right? It's not going anywhere anytime soon. However, explicit APIs are the way of the future. That's the way everything is going in terms of Direct3D has gone that way. Metal, which is the native one for Mac OS, has gone that way. And, you know, it works on Linux. It works on the Switch. You know, there's basically everything is going towards that direction. And things are stepping away from OpenGL. So there's no point in really pursuing that any further. Not to mention that there are features that OpenGL just doesn't have, right? So we don't necessarily need to use that old stuff anymore. We might as well embrace the way that things are going, right? Performance is kind of part of it. We're not doing anything crazy enough yet for performance to really be a huge concern there, in terms of we're using Vulkan for performance, right? So yeah, we're not doing anything crazy yet. Eventually we will. As we build the engine out, we'll eventually take advantage of more of those things. But Aerodash, welcome to the stream. Good to see you. First time chat. New to the stream. Why write your own config language? Is it a config language? So just to kind of give a brief synopsis of what we're doing here is we're building everything here from scratch, or at least where it makes sense to, as a educational exercise. So what we're showing here is all the things that go into building a game engine from scratch, and we're sort of using this as an opportunity to explore various aspects of that. There are some things that we kind of skipped over that aren't really high value, such as like parsing font files or parsing various image formats, right? There's not really a whole lot of value behind that until at least we get into image compression and things like that. But this is basically done as an educational exercise to show a way of building a game engine from scratch, right? It's not the only way to do it. Sometimes it's not even necessarily the right way to do it. But we're using it as a way to explore, try different things, and roll from there. So we made this, which is very similar to JSON with a few changes to its rules, as part of that educational exercise, right? And so yeah, we could have very easily not done this and instead done something like used just JSON, right? And nothing says that we might not have a plugin in the future to use JSON. But in this case, it just kind of made sense and kind of fit with what we were doing. So if you're interested in what the overall project is, it is called the Kohi Game Engine. There is a link to the website there, which is kohiengine.com. And that website basically, pull this down here, gives you everything you need to know about it, right? It started off as a YouTube tutorial series. Excuse me, little indigestion tonight. It started off as a YouTube tutorial series and quickly kind of outgrew that format. We tried a few different formats, ultimately landed on live streaming. And everything we're building here is completely free and open source. Open source meaning that it's hosted on GitHub, and free meaning that it is never going to have any sort of licensing fees. It is never going to have any sort of royalties of any kind ever. It is Apache 2.0 license, which means that you can use it either personally or commercially, however you see fit. All I ask is that you say, if you use the code from here, you just say, hey, I used code from Kohi. That's it, right? That's literally it. It could just be one blurb somewhere. And then, yeah, everything we do here is open source, right? So it's available there for you. And yeah, that's basically kind of what we're doing here. So I hope that makes sense. All right. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Understood. I like the fact that you're doing this as educational content. Yeah, so I'm basically trying to create the resource that I wish I had when I was trying to learn this stuff, right? Because when I was trying to learn it, it wasn't quite as open or easy to learn this stuff, and I kind of had to learn a lot of it the hard way. Am I writing Kson as a separate library? Not at the moment, no. This part of it will probably be, I would say this language will wind up being core to the engine, I think. But if we do a scripting language that is based off of this, then we may extend this into something else. The tokenization we might be able to reuse, but the parser would probably have to be rewritten to make this a actual scripting language. So yeah, this will be in the core. A scripting language probably won't be. So there'll be a slight difference there. It's like JSON versus JavaScript, right? Kind of think of it that way. All right. So we have everything that we need. We're code complete, at least on the parser for now. We may wind up having to come back in here and tweak it or bug fix as we find things, but I'm actually pretty happy with where it is right now. So what I'm going to do is get status. I am actually going to commit this right now so that we have like a working version of it, right? Let's see, what do we want to say? JSON parser code complete. Also fixed an issue with string free relying on memory system state. Okay, and we'll push this. So at least if you want the code up to this point, it's on the refactor xform scene branch. Okay, so there are a couple more aspects of this that we do need to think about, right? So we have what I would call the hardest part of this done, which is building out a tree of elements, which is basically objects and properties of those objects from this file, right? I would consider that the hardest part. But we do need the ability to go the other way as well. Let's see. Iron. I think if you type anything in it that has like a dot with like 3 characters after it, it considers that like a link. And unfortunately, it doesn't show me what that is. But yeah, so like if you were to do it, like I can do it because I'm an admin, right? Like if you were to type in something like this, right? See how it turns it into a link? So yeah, that's probably. We are using C17 at the moment. Although I say that lightly because I'm not using a lot of C17. I don't think I'm using anything beyond C11 technically. Okay. So we have JSON's tree from string, which is a shortcut. Parser tests. It's essentially a shortcut method, right? Because what we would have to do right now is we have to create a parser, run it through the tokenization process, and then build a tree out of that and then destroy the parser, right? And from a user perspective, that kind of sucks, right? It would be much better if we had some sort of API where we could just say, you know what, take this string and give me a tree of objects. And so that's basically going to be a shortcut for all of this stuff. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually take all of this stuff. We have some expecs in there that I'll have to remove, but I'm going to take this stuff and put it here. Right, so we'll say, let's see, tokenizing. This comment's in the wrong spots. It's actually in the wrong spot over here as well. Right, so create a parser to use. Does this return anything? That returns a Boolean. So we probably should go ahead and check that. So we say if this fails, failed to create JSON parser, right? And we'll just return false. Okay. We should also do some sanity checking on this before we do any of that. So we should say if not source, JSON tree from string requires valid source. Right? Return false. We're also going to say we have source, but the string length of source is less than 1, right? So if we have an empty string from that, that's also useless, right? So we'll go ahead and do that. Although maybe we should allow that. We have ads. All right, what we like to do on this stream is whenever ads come up, which is once every 30 minutes for 90 seconds, we like to pause the stream so that nobody misses any content. I know for those of you over there on the YouTube side, ads work a little bit different, but basically we like to even the playing field and just keep it the same so that nobody misses any content, right? So yeah, that is basically what we're doing now. I put a timer up on the screen also so that you guys know exactly when to come back. And then we will continue at that point. I also urge you guys to hydrate if you haven't already during the break. And over there on the YouTube side, I see there's some chats I need to catch up on, so I will do that in just a second. Almost done with ads. Okay. Ads are dead. Cool. All right. So, let me catch up on the YouTube comments first, and then I'll catch up over on the Twitch side. So, Rico, good to see you. Watching where you're talking about your custom parser. What do you think about parser generators? Would you pay for a parser generator that would easily generate parsers for any language? Market research question. I personally would not, no. Because as we see here, I could just write my own. Obviously this is a relatively simple language. If I were to write something that was much more complicated than that, I would probably look for something maybe open source, but I personally would probably not use it. But I'm also probably not the type of person that you would be marketing it to, right? You probably wouldn't want to market that to somebody that likes to write all their own stuff. Compiler dev here, I would not be paid to use a parser generator. Yeah, fair. Yeah, I mean, you say that it makes the work easier, right? But one of the things about not writing all this stuff yourself is you don't know exactly how it works under the hood. It's a bit of a black box, right? And so that can kind of complicate things a little bit, right? Parser generators are more work for non-trivial languages. I would probably agree with that, yeah. Because again, it's a black box. You don't really know how it works under the hood. And if you run into a problem with it, you're not always going to know how to solve that properly. And even then, for trivial languages, you still have to learn to parse a generator instead of just writing the 100 or 200 lines of parsing logic yourself. Yeah, exactly. I mean, our entire parser here, technically speaking, is almost 900 lines, but we have a lot of other crap in here too that I could probably clean up. And there's some repeated code that I could probably get out of here as well. What if the parser generator was easy to use, and then if it was easy to use and learn, and could create a parser for any language, would you use it then? I mean, here's the thing. With anything that is a non-trivial program, complexity's got to be somewhere. So you're either going to have complexity on the user level and keep it simple in the code, or you're going to have complexity in the code to try and make it simple on the user end. The problem with the second approach is, again, the black box issue. The more complex the code, the larger vector for bugs that you have. So again, that probably wouldn't sway my opinion much on that. The promise of it can do everything very easy, I swear, is not a promise you can keep. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, marketing parser generators to programmers doesn't make any sense. At least not like paid ones. Yeah, it depends on the programmer though, right? Like if you're writing, I guess like internal only software in a corporate environment, then maybe you'd use something like that, right? Maybe. Market it as a non-code thing to non-programmers, or treat it as academia research. Yep, exactly. Yep, that's a good point. All right, let's see. First time chat, Ahmed Texel. I'm assuming I'm reading that right. Hello, welcome to the stream. Want to ask you about the possibility of a new rendering API that comes with the features of OpenGL and Vulkan altogether, also with solving the negative sides for both OpenGL and Vulkan. I know I have a long discussion about it, but I only need a brief answer about can it happen or not. Short answer there is no. Right, because those are opposing forces, right? OpenGL is very stateful and tries to abstract a lot of that stuff away from you, whereas Vulkan tries to give you ultimate control. There is no compromise between those two, right? They're at opposite ends of the spectrum. At best, you'll wind up with something right in the middle. At worst, you'll wind up with something right in the middle. Either way, it's probably not going to be a good experience, right? House at work, got 0 ads. Yeah, that happens. So it does vary based off of region and locale, right? So if there's no, and also platform. So if there's no ads to fill the slot for your locale / platform, then there just won't be any of that show, right? Averte, another first time chat. Welcome. Have you seen the Dune movie? Nope, I haven't. Empty input should generate empty output, not error. Yeah, I was kind of on the fence about that, right? Like, it's kind of like maybe we should just return, right? Instead of, like, if it's a null, that's something, right? That's why I was like, I don't know if I want to do it that way, right? But if there's no source at all, like if it's a null pointer, that's something different, right? And the same thing is going to be true for out tree. That has to exist for us to do the thing. Requires a valid pointer to out tree. Oops. Right. And then in this case, we could probably just return an empty tree. Let's see. Did you hear about the news to dump C and C++ code instead of a memory safe language? I agree with Magetz. Dump the government instead. Totally agree. Supe, thank you for the lurk. And thank you for the hydrate. Appreciate that. Yeah, no problem, Ahmed. Happy to answer questions like that, for sure. If you need fine-grained control and optimization, you can't really go middle ground. And that's why I'm saying at best you'll wind up in the middle, and at worst you'll wind up in the middle. That's why all the APIs are going towards what Vulkan and DirectX are doing. Yeah, so the real solution to that is when you build your engine, you abstract that stuff away in your engine, right? So that way your engine on the rendering backend has all the control that it needs, but doesn't expose the rest of that stuff to the engine that isn't needed, right? And that's the approach we took here. All right. Yeah, Rico, I hear you. Couldn't pay me to dump C either. I love and hate it, but I'm not leaving it. Yeah, local, I agree with you 100% on that. Yeah, when I read that, I just laughed. It's like, yeah, no, not gonna happen. Most of the software in the world is written in C, so ain't gonna happen. Not anytime soon, anyway. Do you think there's a hidden agenda? I would argue, when is there not a hidden agenda? Pushing non-C languages? No. I would argue that maybe there's a kickback to the Rust Foundation somehow. Pure speculation, by the way. I have nothing to back that up, right? But if I were to make an argument on it, that would be my argument. Let's see. The DICE, if I recall correctly, the DICE guy who started all this render graph craze said that they had no problem converting their old code into the render graph code because the high-level interpretation of the whole frame. And they managed to make it work better than OpenGL Direct 3D11 because there was no real-time heuristics for optimizing the pipeline. That message was sponsored by the Rust Foundation. Yeah. And that's kind of what we're aiming for here, right? Is we essentially don't want to have to care about the renderer at the engine level, right? Let the renderer optimize within itself. Is essentially, that's my goal anyway. All right. So in this case, string is empty. Return empty tree. The other thing that we should probably do is we should probably trim the source before we do this, right? Because like somebody could pass spaces or something stupid like that, right? And then we're still going to try and tokenize that when really we don't need to bother. The only problem with doing that is if we if we do that, then it's going to throw all of our positional data off in terms of comparing the file to error positions. So, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. What I will do is set out tree root. Let's see, properties equal to 0, and out tree root type equal to that was object type, right? Yeah. To that, right? So this is essentially what an empty tree is going to look like, right? It just has nothing. We'll do return true. All right, so we create a parser to use. If that fails, we return false. The tokenized results, we don't need this expect here. Right, so if this fails to tokenize, then let's do a B8 result here. And we'll start off with true, right? And then if this fails, we'll set result equals false. And then parser tokenization failed. See logs for details. And we're not going to return here. But we do need to pass source. We're not going to return here because we need some cleanup to be done, right? So what we're going to do is have return result, right? And And we'll label this. Let's say KSON parser cleanup. What was the name of this function again? KSON tree from string. Let's do KSON tree from string parser cleanup, right? And then if we hit this, we'll do go to KSON tree from string parser cleanup, right? We're basically just going to follow that pattern right on down. So we actually don't need this token count at all. We don't need this expect. The tree, we don't need that. So the parse result is going to go away. And then we'll check to see if this fails, right? We need to pass, instead of address of tree, we're going to pass out tree directly to that. And then actually we're going to do kind of the same thing here. Let's just say instead of parser tokenization failed, because that doesn't really make sense. We're just going to say tokenization failed. And then we'll say parsing failed. And then we will go to that label down there. And I suppose we don't need to really go to, right? Because it's just jumping to here, but if we ever add code in between here, we might want that. Okay, so either way, that will destroy the parser. And we should be good to go. The only other thing is we don't have a way to actually destroy the KSON tree. So we probably need to do that as well. So we can say if out tree root properties, and we're going to put a to do here. Oops, and a comment. Tree cleanup. Right, and we'll just iterate as far as we got into that tree. Because it's possible we got partially through it and failed, right? And so we don't necessarily want to leak that memory if that failed. Okay, and then this is just the other half of that, which is taking a tree and outputting it to a string, which is sort of the reverse operation. All right, let's see. A language that stamps their users with a cringe name like Rustation cannot have clean beans in their bag. Clean beans in their bag sounds like a... You know what? I'm not going there. I'm older than 12, I swear. Mug9, first time chat, welcome. I'm doing well, thank you. What was your experience between writing the game engine in Windows versus Linux? I'm entering game dev graphics, and I'm assuming you mean avid Arch Linux user for years already, but I'm considering actually switching to Windows if Linux presents real limits in the development process. So, my answer is pretty simple there. I actually prefer developing on Linux. The only reason I'm not right now is because I'm rebuilding my install. I had to quit using Arch Linux because of issues with the NVIDIA driver on my install. And I just kind of got sick of it, and I was kind of due for a new install anyway, so I just blew it away. That being said, I like to distro hop, so this time I'm trying Pop! OS, just because I've never tried it before. But my experience on Linux for game dev has generally been pretty good, actually. As long as you are okay with all of the platform agnostic stuff and getting all of the platform layer stuff laid out, then you should be fine. Like I said, I actually prefer it over Windows. Windows does weird things in the terminal and stuff all the time. So I hope that helps. Harvest and sowing. My dyslexia read that as snowing. I was trying to learn Vulkan for Android, but decided to reverse the IOCTL handler for the K-base mail driver. I mean, first time chat, welcome. Yeah, Vulkan for Android is eventually going to happen on this, by the way. It's in the future, but we are going to support it. How many lines is this whole thing? So I did a line count in November, December, I think, and it was at like 69K then. So probably a few thousand more than that now. Yeah, no problem. Like I said, this is an interactive stream, so if you guys have questions, feel free to ask, right? And shameless plug, if you guys aren't following me, please do, because it helps me grow the stream, right? My Pixel 8 has Vulkan shared object. A Vulkan shared object. Do you mean like it uses shared memory for its GPU? Is that what you mean? Does the concept of exceptions not exist in C? Correct. Yeah, and you can actually shut them off in C++ too. Yeah, there's no try catch. Nope, that's a C++ thing. And even in C++, I don't use them anyway, because I don't like throwing exceptions. I'd rather just assert or handle the error gracefully. But yeah, valid question. Let's see. You like C for its low levelness? Yeah, exactly. You know exactly what your code, what is in my code base and confident that there is no overhead. If you're looking for convenience in object-oriented design, I wouldn't really use C unless you're creating a library. Yeah, exactly. And I don't do OOP anyway, so. Thinking of languages as this is an object-oriented language and this is a procedural language and this is a functional language are not mutually exclusive or useful descriptors. I would agree with that, totally. JavaScript has all three of those all the time. Yep. So is C++, so is C#. Yep, agreed. Fair. C++ exceptions are kind of gross. Yeah, I don't use them. I write procedural C# all the time, even though most people call it an OO language. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of people call it an OO language because that's kind of what the libraries that go with it are. That's how they're written. So it's more so the libraries than the language itself, but yeah. Did you try to use glib in your projects? Has a lot of helpful functions and data types. Yeah, I mean, I've used glib before. Yeah, glib. C++ got std expected in 2023. It'll probably take GCC and Clang 2 more years to implement it. I don't know what std expected is, to be honest with you. Just as God intended. Nice. What did Harvest? I'm not sure why you got timed out. You didn't post links. It was just a path file name for the Vulkan. Oh yeah, yeah. It interprets that as a link. Like if you type like a bunch of random letters and then a dot and three letters after it, it doesn't matter what it is. It turns it into a link. Yeah. Unfortunately, its detection of that isn't the greatest. Okay. So, really, that should be all that we have to do here, I think. So the other half of this, we should probably do the tree cleanup before we forget. So, did I already stub out something for this? I don't think I did. So we have the parser, create, destroy, tokenize, parse, and then the convenience methods here. We also need, we'll export this, and we'll do I guess if we clean up and we fail on that, like we don't really care. So I'm going to say a return type of void. And I'm going to call it case and tree cleanup. right? So we'll put that here at the end. And then if tree, we will do the thing. All right. So I guess we'll say if tree and tree root properties exists, right? Because there's not going to be much we can do if that doesn't exist. So properties is going to be a D array. It always is, because that's the way we've created it. So we'll do U32. Actually, should we? I should probably make this just a recursive function that takes in an object. So let's actually, because we're going to have to recurse down the tree. So yeah, let's do that. Let's do static void casein tree object cleanup. And it's going to take, I guess we don't really need the tree. We really just need the object. Right? And then here we can just say casein tree object cleanup. We could pass the address of tree root. Right? And then in here, we can say, I guess we should probably say if object, right? We should probably check that first. And object properties, right? And then we can do a U32 prop count equals. And we'll do darray length. And for that, we're just going to do object properties. And then we'll loop through each property. U32i equals 0, I is less than prop counts plus I. And I guess we'll essentially just look at the type. So we'll do switch. Actually, before we can even do that, let's do casein property. And that will be a pointer, which is the address of object properties sub I. And we do that because we want to check p type. So case property type. Let's do property type object first, right? Because that one's kind of tricky. So in here, we will do, let's see. I think we actually can just, I think it's the same thing. So we need to do U32 object prop count equals darray length, and that's going to be p value O for the object array. And then again, we'll do for U32 j equals 0, j is less than object property count plus j. And then we'll just recurse, right? So we'll say casein tree object cleanup address of p value o sub I sub j. And then here we'll do darray destroy p.value.o. And for good measure, we'll set p.value.o to null. Let's see. We have ads. I had a feeling. So for those of you who are, ads, exactly. So for those of you who are new to the stream and can still hear me talking because you're not getting served ads right now, we do like to pause the stream whenever ads come up so that nobody misses any content. So it's generally 90 seconds every 30 minutes. We're about halfway through there now. I usually do suggest you guys also hydrate during the ad breaks. Hydrate chat, exactly. I should add that to the auto message there. One of these days I'm going to automate the ad screen so that it pops up automatically and I don't have to watch so closely for it, because I miss it by a couple seconds usually if I don't happen to see it right away. All right, ads are dead. Ruche, thank you for the R hype. darray length calculates the array length. Is it not easy to add a separate property length in the variable to store and do not calculate each time? It does not calculate that, actually. It does not calculate it at all. So our darray, did I just, yeah. Our darray has this header in front of the actual memory, right? And so what that means is every time we create a darray, we have this structure that sits in front of it. And then there's actually the array memory after that. And so what we do is whenever we create a darray, we take the header size and then the needed array size, right? Which we know from the stride of each element, as well as the number of entries that we're allocating for. We add those two together, right? And then we actually allocate that much memory. We do also have the ability to create one of these from a frame allocator, which is basically a linear allocator that is reset every frame. So if we need to pull the memory from that, we can optionally supply that as well. So we hang on to that. But basically the way that we do this is we allocate that whole block of memory. And then when we go out to actually return the array itself that's created, it is actually the new array that we allocated plus the header size. So it moves that pointer forward by the header size. And then that is what we operate on. So what this allows us to do is we can operate on it, iterate on it, just like it's a normal C-style array. But we also have that header information that's stored just before it. And so as we use the macro, when we go to destroy that array, we know to move back in memory by the header size, which is done here. And then we can get all of the information that we need straight out of the header, right? So that's the way that works. So we don't calculate it every time. We store that data, and that way we can just easily move around in memory and grab that data as we need it. Okay. let's see. So I guess the next thing that we have to do is, let's see, we're iterating the properties of this guy. If one of the properties has an object property itself, right, if it's an object, then the object technically has a sub-object that's created to hold its properties, right? So we iterate that. Is that right? Or do we do the properties of that? If the property type is an object, yeah. Okay, if the property type is an object of the object that we parsed here, then yeah, it could be an array. It's always created as an array. All right, so the next thing that we have to do is handle the case of property type array, which is the second most complicated case. Break here. And so this case is going to be, I think, almost identical. So actually, I'm going to start off doing that, right? So it should be relatively the same thing. We might actually be able to combine these because I think under the hood, they actually operate exactly the same. So I know we've repeated ourselves here, but that's because that might have to change. The next one we need to handle is string, right? So we'll do this, break, right? And then I guess just for safety purposes, we'll check p.value.s to make sure it exists. And then if that exists, we'll do a string free on it, right? p.value.s string free. So we free up that, and then p.value.s equals 0, right? Now that's not liking the fact that it's const, but we're destroying it, so I don't care. All right, so the only other ones are Boolean and number. Boolean. Property type number. And then, didn't we have an unknown in here? Yeah, we do have an unknown. Okay. So, basically, these all three are going to be handled the exact same way, but we're gonna throw a little bit of an error for the unknown type. So, for number, it's a no op, right? And that's because we don't have any dynamically allocated memory that we need to free there. It would have just either been a float value or an integer value in the value, and that's just, it just exists there, right? So there's really nothing to do there. And then the unknown is pretty much the same thing, but I'm going to throw a warning, actually. And we'll just say kson tree object cleanup encountered and unknown property type, right? And that's all we can do. We're just going to warn about it, just so that we have visibility of it, right? And we're also going to handle the default case this way, just in case. All right, so at this point, we will have iterated all of the properties, so we can actually destroy object properties, right? So darray destroy object properties, and then we'll also zero that out so that anything looking at it, properties equals 0. So that anything looking at it knows that there's nothing there, right? Okay, so I guess the other thing that we could do is for each of these properties, I guess we could flip the property type back to unknown. Although there's not really much of a point to doing that because we destroy the darray. I guess that's fine, right? So that should recurse and do everything that we need it to. Let me think. Yeah, that should do it. That should give us everything that we need to do, I believe. And then it's void return type, so we don't care about the results of it. I suppose one other thing we could do is we could say tree root type. Oh, that's object type. No, we don't have an unknown for that. All right. That's pretty much it then. That's the tree cleanup. As far as I can tell, that's all we need to do. So, in this case, let's see, tree from string. We need to do tree cleanup only if not result and properties have actually been written, right? So we'll do case in tree cleanup, and we'll do the I guess we'll just do out tree, right? So if we have a failure here, we'll go ahead and clean up that tree as well, and then return result. So that should give us everything that we need as far as that's concerned. Now, the other way is going to be interesting. And that's going to be this guy. And that's basically going to be taking one of these trees and writing it out to a file. Let's see. Do you use fsanitize to detect undefined behaviors? Do you use valgrind to detect memory leaks? So right now, I'm currently not. I have to do a pass on that. I have done a couple passes, like off camera, and I've resolved a lot of them, but I'm sure I've probably introduced a couple. That memory management is quite a piece of code. Is it viable to cover that logic with tests? Some of it, yeah. If you're talking about which piece of memory management stuff, I guess. If you're talking about the cleanup, probably not. Although we could theoretically keep track of like how many objects we destroy and compare that against how many objects we created. And then, that would be the unit test essentially. So maybe we could do it from that perspective. Excuse me. Okay. So, this tree essentially is going to need to be recursed, rather, similar to how the cleanup is done. But we are going to have to think about some things. So one of the things that we're going to have to think about is we're going to need a stack again, essentially, right? To maintain like how far into the file we are. So once we enter an array, right, we should probably this would be incremented, right? So that we know to tab over, for example. And the tabbing isn't really that important, I suppose. We could just write it out line by line, but it's a lot easier to read this way, right? So like when we open this, we'll say, okay, indent levels plus like 1, right? And then this would be plus another 1, so it'd be indent level 2 for this line. And then we'd go back down to 1, and then back down to 0. That's more or less what I'm thinking. And then we just, we sort of iterate these from the top to the bottom. Okay, so there's a couple of things that we're going to have to pass around to our recursive function. I don't think we're going to have to pass the tree. We are going to have to pass like a current object that we're in. We're going to have to pass a pointer to a string that we're going to move through. We are also going to have to pass a pointer to that indent level, because that's going to need to be modified as we continue down the scope. Actually, do we need a pointer to that? We might not, because when we kick back out of that doesn't have to be a pointer, I don't think. I think just local changes in that will be fine, scope-wise. We should be fine. Yeah. Okay. So I guess over here, if not tree, let's see, we could throw an error here, or we could just return an empty string. Here's the question about that, though. So we should probably make a rule that whatever we do here, it's always going to dynamically allocate a string. So maybe instead of returning an empty string at any time, right? We wouldn't want to return like a constant empty string. That would be bad, because if we went to go free that, as you would expect, if it dynamically allocated memory, right, it's going to crash. So I suppose if it's empty, maybe we could just return null instead of an empty string. And maybe that's how we do it. I think that should be fine, right? It's not technically a failure, right? Because we could say if not tree, or if not tree root properties, right? So that essentially means it's empty. If we return 0, I think that's a safe assumption, right? As opposed to like dynamically allocating a string, that's just empty. Seems dumb. It would essentially be a string of one character, which is a null terminator. Let's see. Taman, good to see you. I'm doing well. How about you? Glad to see you here. We have our parser working, by the way. We are now kind of going in the opposite direction and taking the tree that we've built and writing it out to a file. You're doing well too. I'm glad to hear it. I know you had some struggles the other day, so I'm glad to hear you're doing well. Let's see. I'm glad you guys are having such a good chat over there on the YouTube side. I can't keep up with it, but I'm glad you guys are. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. By the way, I should also call out that we do have a Discord server. So if you guys are interested and want to talk to a lot of like-minded folks, the Discord server is there. Do I have a... I don't remember if that works or not. Does it? Maybe? Might have condensed it all. Yep, there it is. Okay. So yeah, we do have a Discord server. Yeah, and I think there's like 850 people in it at the moment. So it's reasonably sized. All right. So I guess we should start recursing this guy, right? So actually, let's do... Should we recurse objects the same way that we're doing? We might actually be able to use like this function pretty much. Yeah, I think we can. Right, so let's do... I'm gonna copy pasta this, right? And we're gonna change it up. We're gonna say case and tree object to string, right? The nice part about this is we can const this because we shouldn't be changing it. So we loop through, if the object has properties, we loop through those properties. We should probably also, let's see, where do we, so we'll do a character string, let's see, should we do out source? And then we should probably, let me think about this for a second. Because we're going to need to resize this string a lot, right? So I'm thinking a pointer to a string is definitely going to be the way to go. Because we don't know how big this is going to be as we write it out, right? I suppose one thing that we could do is split it up in chunks, but that seems like more work than it's worth. So we should probably keep like a running position. And that would need to be a pointer. So we'll say U32 position. And then we'll also say, I don't know, like U8, U16. Indent level. Because I suppose we could have a really huge file that has more than 255 indent levels, right? I don't see it happening, but could. If we have a really complex scene or something, I guess. So we loop through the properties. And then for a object, we are essentially going to recurse that object. So essentially, object to string, right? We'll pass that object. We'll pass outsource. We'll pass position. We'll pass indent level. Right? Obviously, we want to get rid of the destroy and the set to 0. So when we encounter an object, we need to write to the outsource string. And I'm just trying to think, how are we going to know when we need to resize the string, etc. Trying to think of the best way to handle this, because we could try to allocate something really big so that we never like run into an issue. And then like trim it afterwards. But that seems like a huge waste of memory. Let's see. What's the difference between OpenGL and Vulkan? Huge difference. Vulkan is definitely the newer, more explicit API, right? So it gives you lots of control at the risk of shooting yourself in the foot. OpenGL still allows you to shoot yourself in the foot, but not quite as easily, right? It's got a little bit more of a simpler API, but it also comes at a price, right? It maintains a lot of state internally that you don't have control over, that you may want control over. So there's drawbacks and benefits to both. It really just depends, right? But OpenGL is no longer being updated, whereas Vulkan is. So that's a consideration as well. Let's see. 5 gigabyte case and file. Yeah, I know, right? That's what I'm trying to think of. It's like, how crazy do I want to go on this? Essentially. OpenGL you can shoot yourself in the foot. Yeah, for sure. Pool allocator. Well, I don't think how would a pool allocator help, right? Because it's going to be, remember, it's going to be like a string that continuously has to get longer until we're done building the thing. So theoretically, even if you did have a pool allocator, how big do you make it? And it could run out of memory as well. Lots of implicit error checking in OpenGL drivers causes some slowdown too, for sure. Yep. Can you just constantly keep writing instead of building the whole string? Double string size times 2 each time. That's more along the lines of what I was thinking. It was just double it each time. And I could start with a reasonably high number, like 1024 or something like that. And then we trim it afterwards. Flush after a buffer is filled. Yeah, and that was kind of the first direction I was leaning in, right? Like, do we have just a single buffer that we keep writing to, and every time we hit that limit or come close to it, or we hit because the problem is like we could also partially write out a token, which would kind of suck, right? So we'd probably want to flush it whenever we detect that it's going to be filled, but by the next thing that has to go into it. So I don't know that that's going to be necessarily any faster than just reallocating the string, truthfully, and just maintaining a position in the buffer as we go. Sorry, just joined. What are you programming? So, first time chat, welcome, by the way. So what we are working on tonight is we have developed a custom storage format for our game engine. And it's mainly going to be used for scene files, at least initially, but it's going to be used for all kinds of storing of properties, being able to nest objects, things like that. So this file looks kind of crazy, right? Because we were just kind of testing all of the wacky, wild things you could do, like mixed arrays and things like that. But it's a very similar language to JSON, except it has a little bit of its own rules. And we've already written the tokenizer and the parser for this. So now what we're doing is we're going back the other way. And I'm just trying to think about how to manage the memory for the string. But I do think probably the best way is just going to be double the string size every time and keep writing. So we're going to need to know, this is sort of a recursive function that deals with the objects that are in the tree that we generated from this. So we're going to need to know a few things. The object that we're writing out, right, and its properties. The out source string, which is a pointer to a string, so we can actually reallocate that if we need to. The current position that we are in that string. I suppose we would probably also need U32, and it's going to be a pointer as well. Source. Let's not do source length. That could be confusing. Source, source allocated, right? So we have that, the position in the actual string, and then indent level, which is to basically manage these tabs, right? So we need to know those things. We also need adds. So there's that. So the adds are, they come up once every 30 minutes for 90 seconds. So we just pause the stream whenever that comes up so that nobody misses content. The age-old C technique of do it twice. Stringification, you could pre-pass the tree to estimate or totally calculate the length if you're worried about reallocating so many times. I suppose that's true too. I suppose that is actually a damn good point. I did not think of that at all. That's what I'm going to do. That's a good idea, local. Thank you. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Almost done with ads. Okay. All right, so actually local over on the YouTube side just brought up an idea that I don't know why I didn't think of myself, but it's a good idea. Instead of doing all this stupid stuff. Basically, let's just traverse the tree twice. Figure out how long it needs to be, allocate the string, and then write to the string by traversing it again. So yeah, I actually use it. I use it quite a bit when I'm setting up systems in the engine. I just, for some reason, didn't think of it this time. So let's see. In this case, we do need the source. We do need the position. We do need the indent level. What I'm going to do, we don't need a pointer to this anymore. So what we can do is if we include the outsource, then we write to it. If it's not included, right, we just pass null here, then we're going to say we're counting only. And what we'll do is we'll have position. I guess position would be updated as we traverse through it, so that also becomes length by the time we're done. So I don't think we need anything else, actually. Yeah, that should do it. Yeah, so I think local. I think instead of having a an allocate flag, I'm gonna follow the Vulkan pattern here, where it'll do a query for like how many things you have, and if you pass a 0 into the actual array, it won't fill it out, and then if you do and you pass the amount of things you have, it'll actually allocate and fill out that array. So in this case, if we pass outsource in as 0, then we're just going to obtain the length. The length will eventually be, the position will become the length, essentially. So since we're taking a pointer to position, as we move that forward, as we write the things, by the time we're done writing, position will be the length. And then we'll have position, and then we can call the same function again, passing an actual allocated string to outsource, and then we should be good. So yeah, I think that's what we're going to do. Yeah, the old do it twice, right? Pre-process, yeah. Why didn't I think of that stupid flush buffer? Yeah, exactly. I was like, that just seems so complicated for what the task is, right? I have to keep reminding myself simple is best. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll loop through the properties and then say if we are opening up an object, then what we're going to do is, let me think about this for a second. So the property itself, we actually have to do something before we even get to the property's value. Right, so as we're looping through the properties, we would need to do I think we're going to have to check its name. Well, you know, I need this next line. We're going to have to check its name first. So if p.name exists, right, which we do have unnamed things where it does not exist. So if it exists, then we're going to write the name, then a space, and then write the value, right? So in this case, what we'll do, if we are parsing a property, we're going to be starting from the beginning of a new line. So we need to take the indent level, and I guess we should say U8 indent spaces, right? Make it adjustable. So we'll do position plus equals. We'll do indent spaces plus, let's get a string length, u32 name length equals string length p.name, right? And then we'll do indent spaces plus name length, and then plus 1 for an additional space. Plus 1 for additional space. And by grouping it together this way, if we have an unnamed property like this in an array, we're not going to do any of this stuff. Although we should probably always write the indent spaces. Yeah, that should probably always happen. So let's do this. Oops. Right. So we'll get rid of that from here. Write indent, right? And then so what we'll do is for u32 I guess we'll say s equals 0, s is less than indent spaces. And then I guess we can do outsource sub s equals space, right? And then position plus plus, right? And so what we're going to do is we'll say, move this down here. Have to wrap this in scope here. And actually this should probably be as well. Right, so we'll say here, if outsource, then we'll do that, else we'll do this, right? So that's the indent. Zoster, thank you for the follow. Welcome. In the olden days, we had to pre-process. These days, random allocation is far more par for the course. Yeah, we actually try to avoid random allocation. So this is going to avoid that nicely. Oh, I forgot the S++ here. Okay. So we write the indent or increase the position. In this case, let's see, do we want to do... We should probably write a string. We should probably like write static void how do I want to do this? Write string. We're going to take the outsource U32 position U16. Actually, we don't need indent level. Should just be these things. And actually, we could just do that. Right, so we can do if outsource, then we'll set up a loop. And instead of indent spaces, we'll get the string length. So U32 length equals string length, string length, right? And then we do string sub s and increment position. If we don't have outsource, then we'll just do position plus equals length, right? And that means that we'll need to move this up here. Okay. So this way, whenever we go to write this kind of thing, I guess we could also have one for write spaces. That way we don't have this code repeated all over the place. Right, so let's do write spaces, and then U8 count. I guess I could do a U16. I can't imagine having to write that many spaces, but whatever. So we'll do count here, and then this is going to equal space. right? And then count, right? So here we can do right indent. And all this has to be now is right spaces. And we'll do outsource position. And count is going to be, whoops, indent spaces. Then we don't need all this, right? And then we can write the name. So we can say write string outsource position and then p.name. Right, that's if we have a name. That way we don't need to do that. Oops, I don't need this there. And then write spaces, outsource position. Whoops. Help if I hit the right freaking keys, right? And we write a single space afterwards. So this becomes a lot cleaner. I like that a lot better. Yeah, I agree, Local. The lost art of smart allocations, even though memory is practically free, we should strive not to abuse that privilege. Yeah. And it has real consequences, especially like on some consoles and stuff that are super sensitive to memory fragmentation. So we try to avoid that wherever we can. Of course, we need 65K spaces. Yeah. In the era of 0.5 gigabyte executables, we probably don't need to care this much. I disagree, though. It's less of an issue these days, but these kind of things add up. Have you guys actually seen the there was a bug with Grand Theft Auto 5 when it first came out, where the online version of it was taking forever to load, and somebody basically found a bug in the JSON parser where it was pulling a file that was causing it to hang for like a good couple minutes, and it was just because somebody wasn't being careful of what they were doing. It's that kind of stuff that can really, really screw you. And not even, yeah, fragmentation and cache coherence, exactly. Yeah, you still have to be careful. That bug made you quit the game, yeah. I forget exactly who made a video about it, but yeah. My brain just exploded when that happened, because I'm like, really? Nobody caught that? First time chat, welcome, by the way. Was it an article? Yeah, it was maybe it was an article, not a video, I can't remember. That bug made you quit the game as well? Yeah. Madness, I say. All right. So we write the property, we write the name in a space if it has a name. Then we write the value. So the object itself would come after... Oh, you know what? If it has a name... then it's also, if it has a name, it's basically going to be not in this scenario where it's part of an array. So if it has a name, then it's also going to need an equal sign. So actually, we actually need to take this. Oops. Need to write an equal sign in another space. Need that as a string, right? So write that, then a space, then equal, then another space, right? Now we can write the value. So if it's an object, we are going to want to write two things. You know what? I'm just going to copy this. we're going to want to write an object opener and a new line, right? So that's basically going to be one of those and a new line, right? And then as we write the properties of this, we'll be good. So every time we recurse this, should we pre-increment or post-increment is the question. Thank you for the follow, by the way. I think we should increment in here. So if we do indent level, let's make this. Let's make this an I16. Reason being is because the very first thing we are going to do when we come in here is increase that. Now I do realize that that is local only, right? But what this means is we are also going to need to start with an indent level of 0 when we first start writing out this file. So in order to do that, we're going to need to actually start with -1. So when we call this on the very first thing, the first object, right, that root object that we have, we want an indent level of 0 or of -1, and then this will bring it up to 0, and then we should be good. Uzziah, thank you for the follow. I hope that's a how I pronounce that. Appreciate it. GTA thing was funny. They did a list traversal of keys instead of using a map. That's what it was. Yeah. It was something like super inefficient and stupid. And terrible. All right. So we write an object opener and a new line. Then we process this. So we pass the indent level here. We did change this a little bit though. So the indent level, we also need indent spaces. All right. So we do that. The nice part about doing the indent here is that we don't have to decrement it later, right? Because it's a copy of the variable. And so when we step back out of this, we will naturally decrement it, right? So if we've stepped into an object, written the properties of said object, then all we need to do at the end is write a closer for said object, right? So that is going to be that guy with a new line directly after it. Arrays are going to be the same thing, actually, just with a different token. So for an array, we'll do the same thing here. Just replace that with a open bracket. And come down here, replace this with that, and then replace the actual function call in here with that. Okay? All right, so that handles those two. Now, strings are going to be a little bit of a special case. So the value of a string has got to be surrounded in quotes, and we don't save the quote as part of the saved string because that would not make any sense. So the first thing we're going to do is if we have a value of s, I should think about this, right? What happens if we don't have a string value, but we have something here that actually exists or needs that, right? Do we write an empty string? I think I'm going to write an empty string if we don't have it. So if we don't have a string value, then I'm going to write string. meant to hit. Write an empty string, right? And this is going to be \quote \quote for an empty string. If we do have a string, u32 string, actually let's just say length. String length, and we'll say p.value s, right? And then we'll do a 2 calls to write string. Actually, I don't even need to do this here, come to think of it. All I have to do is p.value.s here. Oops. There we go. And then write one double quote in a new line after, and before it, write just a double quote with no new line. All right. So we'll do surround the string with quotes and put a new line after. All right, that handles that one. So Booleans and numbers are going to be handled differently. So, whoops. So we do need to handle these separately this time around. All right. So, I think the easiest way to do this is do a write string. And we're going to say p.value b. If that's true, we're going to write true. Otherwise, we're going to write false. All right? And then a new line after it. Nice and simple. Okay, so a number. Let's see. String. Let's see. Do we have? I just thought of something. We have to have a reliable way here to tell whether this is a integer or not. And also, do we have a conversion function for this? Do we really not have one? Can't be. String 2, I don't know why my IntelliSense wasn't showing it up. Okay. So we do have, oh wait, that's 2 F32. I need from. String append int. Not exactly what I'm looking for. Crap, I don't think we have it. How did I miss that? So we have an append. Turns a new string into the destination. I guess I could use that and just pass an empty string here. It's kind of hacky, but whatever. But how am I going to know because the property type is only number. Which means it could either be integer or float. That's not going to work. What is going to work is adds. So one of the things that we do is we stop the stream whenever ads come up, which is once every 30 minutes for 90 seconds, just so that nobody misses anything. So those of you who are or can still hear me, just hang tight and we'll be back in just a minute once ads are complete. Put quotes outside of if. Not sure what you mean. I'll re-ask once the ads are done. Time to hydrate. Yes, definitely. Nice, Taman. Good idea. All right. Ads are dead. So for those of you who are new, I'd just like to pause the stream whenever ads come up so that nobody misses anything. And on Twitch, that's once every 30 minutes for 90 seconds. All right. So what editor do you use? Can you show it to us? I use NeoVim. Yeah, so I actually have my detailed setup. I'll drop a link in chat. The details about my setup on NeoVim are there. I will also drop this over on the YouTube side for anybody that's interested. That is the editor that I use. I do still use this guy for debugging for now, because I just haven't had the time, frankly, to get comfortable enough with other debuggers off camera in order to get comfortable with them to the point where I want to use them on stream. All right. So, Averte, you were saying put quotes outside of if. What do you mean by that? Because I'm not sure. Okay. So there is a bit of an issue with the property type number. We do actually need to treat these separately. So I guess what we'll say is we'll have int and float. And we'll have to treat those things separately. That also is going to break a couple of things in our parser that we're going to have to fix. I should probably go fix those now. Specifically right here. So here is the property type. So we're technically not going to know either of these things until we get down here. So unfortunately, that means that we're going to have to repeat our code a little bit. So let's do this. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Appreciate that. So we're going to say, for this one, it's going to be float. And for this one, it's going to be int. Right? And so that's going to be that. We're also going to have to do the same thing here. So we'll just say p type. All right. So that should fix that. So at least we have two types of numbers. So if we have an int, we're essentially going to do a character buffer. And I'll just call this buffer, whatever, doesn't matter. I don't think we can go more than like 20 characters, but I'll make it 30 instead. And we're going to say string append int. The destination is buffer. The source string is just an empty string. And then the I64 is going to be p.value I. So that's how we build our string. And then we will do a two write strings. All right, so we'll do buffer. And that should do it. And then actually our float is going to be mostly the same. We're just going to call a different function. So this is going to be f32. Or is it just float? Did I actually do float there? Okay. All right. And that's going to be the same thing. All right, so that handles ints, booleans, floats, strings, arrays. Oops, almost had the wrong symbol there. Copy pasta. And objects. This, in theory, should be it. So since this is recursive, all we need to do now is call it once, case and tree object to string. So what we'll do is object to string. We'll do the address of tree.root. The source, this time, the first call is going to be 0. We'll have u32 position, let's call it length, right? And we're going to set that to 0. So we'll say length. The indent level is going to be -1. And then the indent spaces we're going to keep to 4. Right? And then we'll do a well, actually, I guess we'll have to do a character out string equals kallocate size of character times length plus 1. And memory tag string. And now we can call this again. This time passing out string, which it should write to. And then here we return out string. And that should be it, in theory. Looks like we do have... Oh, right. We don't want to kill that because we're not destroying anymore. So let me just make sure I got rid of all the destroys and all that stuff. I think I did. Nope. Missed one. Okay. All right, cool. $10.53. Right. Okay, so this needs to be float needs to be included in here. And int. So we'll make sure it builds first. Okay. And then we'll do case and parser tests. We'll just jam this into the same test. Excuse me. So I guess, let me think about the way to handle this. So I guess we can do string equals case and tree to string, and then we pass the address of tree, and then we'll go ahead and do a kinfo string. All right, and so we'll debug with this guy. All right, so we have our parse result is true. So now let's see what kind of chicanery we get from the string. That doesn't look right, but let's spit it out anyway. Well, that's neat. So why did we not get... Oh, I think I know what it is. I think there were some places. So position. Oh, right. Forgot to reset that. Are you a fan of ethical hacking? What skills do I need to study? Like what Joe Granda does in his life. I don't honestly know too much about it, to be completely honest with you. It's something that's always kind of interested me, but not enough where I've spent a decent amount of time on it. So unfortunately, I can't really speak to it as an authority. Do you keep printing a proper amount of spaces for the current indent level? Yeah, we should be doing that. I think I've got that covered. Yeah. It looks like I'm overwriting data somewhere, though. This is all kinds of wrong. Let's see. So write string essentially looks to see if we have an outsource. What does it think that, you know what, let me debug this a little bit. Right here. Let's get rid of this one. What does it think the length is? 530. Okay, and what is the size of the file? 735. So it's obviously tripping up somewhere. Although this is technically the length of the file as we wrote it, right? Which has comments in it. Probably extra spaces where there don't need to be any. So realistically, there's probably some extra characters in this file that aren't needed. Also, this counts both carriage return and line feed. Because see, we only have the one character selected, but it counts it as two. So that might actually be correct. But what I'm thinking is it's probably something with the position itself not being treated correctly somewhere. So here, like, we're dereferencing it before we increment it, which is the correct thing to do. Yeah, I don't see anything here that immediately makes me think that it's wrong. And all we do is call these things all over the place. So it should be, I think it's incrementing position correctly. Oh, wait a minute. I know what the problem is. I know what the problem is. We are not taking position into account here. Right? This should be position plus S. Actually, it should just be position. That's what it is. Pretty confident that's what it is. Let's see. Haven't caught most of the actual coding live and haven't looked at the source, so I have a curiosity about your habits. How often do you rely on asserts to maintain invariance and or self-document logic? So I'm using asserts more. I've been throwing k-errors all over the place to try and catch that, but generally speaking, I try to avoid crashing the application as much as possible and try to handle things gracefully as much as possible. So like if I'm missing an asset, like if I'm missing a texture or something, I display a checkerboard pattern, that kind of thing. I try to avoid crashing whenever I can. So asserts, unfortunately, don't allow you to do that, but they're great for debug builds. And I essentially have like debug asserts that I can use in debug builds, and then they if-def out for release builds. Yeah, don't assert for expected behavior. Yeah, no. Definitely don't do that. All right, let me try this one more time. Let's see what the out string is here. That looks more like what I expect, kind of. All right, so let's just write this out. Oh, you know what? It's doing all the rest of the unit tests because I didn't tell it to stop. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to do this again. All right, so we have Looks like our indents are off by 1. Oh, and I think I know why, actually. I think I know why. I think that is because, well, let's see, indent level. Maybe not. Indent level should be, we do indent level -1 here. Yep, that is an I-16. We increment it immediately on the way in. So write spaces, indent spaces. Right, that would be a 0 at this point. So it shouldn't be this logic, I don't think. Let's debug it. Oh my god. I looked at that for a second. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I doing... No, that is the right thing. Yeah, -1. So indent level is 0. Oh. That's the problem. So this should be... Where was that? Indent level times indent spaces. Oh, you know what? There's another case I thought of too. We're gonna need to handle that. Potentially with these object openers and closers. Definitely the closer. The opener, though, could potentially be assigned something. Let's see, how do I want to do this? So if we're opening an object inside of an array, we would want to do an indent. But if we're opening an object as an assignment to an identifier, which we could technically figure out here. So if p name, but if we have a property name, then we can say b8 object needs indent. And that's going to be true unless we have a name, and then it's going to be false. And so here, if object needs indent, then we do this. right? And that's probably going to be the same rule for arrays. All right. Let's try that and see what it looks like. All right, so we'll run this. All right, I think we can kill this breakpoint at this point. All right, and take a look. Hey, it's mostly right. Look at that. Mixed array equals, we open that. We have these properties here. Looks like the wrong indent level when we open the object, if it's in an array. Yeah, so those are a little bit wrong, but I'm satisfied with that for now. You don't multiply a space amount with the indent level. Well, that must have been an old comment. Yeah, I did eventually figure it out. Yeah. It looks like these closing ones need it. Which, yeah, these guys need it. I just need it. That's just a matter of taking this and putting that here. So I'm thinking for these arrays, if we need to indent that, I'm thinking it's probably just going to be indent level -1. Not 100% sure about that. So that would be the same here. -1. I'm just going to try that real quick, and if it's not it, I'll figure it out later. It's not really that important. All right, so let's just run this one more time. Did I leave it running or something? Okay. I think that's it. This one's kind of weird. So the indent level is a little bit weird inside of an array. But you know what? We've already banged out a lot of stuff tonight, so I am more than happy with that. And as a result, this is actually where I'm going to call it for tonight. So to string conversion complete. Thank you for the follow. And I'm going to push this so you guys have access to it if you are interested in it. All right. So with all that said, thanks Supe for hanging out. Appreciate it. And thank you to the rest of you guys for hanging out. Yeah, super happy with the progress we made tonight. Printing with an object array with leading indentation too. Yeah, I think there's just, it's like an off by one thing, I think. Yeah, all right, cool. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today and interacting. There was a lot of interaction on both sides, so I really appreciate it. If you guys haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you toss me a follow on either side, either on the YouTube or the Twitch side. One or if you're feeling especially generous, both, right? But yeah, we oh, are we gonna have an ad starting soon? Seriously? Right. Well, I'm gonna look for somebody to raid. Ugh, ads. All right, we will be back after the ads. Dang it! I was hoping to get in before the ad break. Let's see. We're almost, well, we're halfway done with ads, and then we'll raid. Yeah, it could have been an off by double, actually. Yeah, and by the way, if you guys haven't already, feel free to drop in on the Discord server as well. Ads are almost done. All right. So tonight, I am going to raid Ferret Software because it is a ferret rescue who's entirely paid for by the ad revenue of just having the stream up. Looks like they're all asleep right now. But basically, this is a rescue run by Pirate Software, who's another dev here on Twitch. And he takes in ferrets that are in near-death scenarios that would normally be put down and gives them all of the medical care that they need, as well as a permanent home. He doesn't rehome them. So all the ferrets that live here are going to have a good life and live out their life there. I think it's a really good cause. I like to support it. So yeah, that's who we're going to raid tonight. I'll shoot you guys over a link on the YouTube side in just a second. But yeah, thank you guys for being here, and I will see you on the next stream.